Good evening and welcome to blackdoctor.org. I am your host, Dr. Renee. And this evening, first of all, I have to do some housekeeping. Everyone, please share because what we are talking about tonight, I promise you, if you're not already experiencing it, you probably will experience it one day in life. So I want you to please make sure that you share the broadcast, share away. We're on several different platforms. Please share on whatever platform you're watching us on because I know this is going to be some great information. So this is National Caregivers Month, Family Caregivers Month. And I say family caregivers because caregivers can be obviously babysitters and stuff like that. But I'm talking about family caregivers as far as I'm sure you've heard the term the sandwich generation. So the sandwich generation is the people who are raising their children, but also taking care of parents. And so that there's a lot of that going on because baby boomers are getting older and living longer, thank God. So this is National Family Caregivers Month. And so we have one doctor who also is an expert on caregiving because of having to caregive her father, but she will tell her story. But she is pediatrician by training and has branched off into this fabulous business of helping people like me who are new caregivers that are like, what's going on and what do I do? And then we have Angela Brooks, who is a caregiver like myself. So tonight's going to be fabulous. Please make sure you share. Before we get started, because I will forget, I just wanted to let anyone know that there is a fabulous virtual conference because Black Doctor, we supply you with all the information. She Biz conference is happening next week on Tuesday the 16th. And you can go to Eventbrite and look up all the information, or you can follow me. I am speaking about health and wellness, of course. So if you would like to hear about how to maintain your health and have your business at the same time, you would want to listen to my talk. So definitely check that out. And then also there is a free conference. Save a Girl, Save a World actually partners with blackdoctor.org. And they mentor high schoolers and college girls. And they're having a virtual summit this weekend. It is free $99. Did you hear me say free $99 for high schoolers and college girls? So that starts tomorrow evening and then wraps up on Saturday. And I will be speaking as well about health on that on Saturday. And I'll actually be talking about healthy eating and weight loss. So please check out their website, bit.ly/SAGSAW Summit. You can register there. Go to their website, sagsaw.org. Follow me, and I can get you information, DM me or whatever. And so I have taken care of all of the housekeeping, and we will get started. Let me find my guests. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Like I said, this topic hits home, and I know that more than the three of us have dealt with or dealing with this. And like I said, if you have not, you probably will one day in life. So let's get started. First, let's start with Angela. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the fabulous things you do because you do some great things in the community anyway. Oh, you're on mute.
It couldn't it has to happen at least once a day.
It's okay.
Oh man. So again, I'm Angela Brooks. I am located here in Chicago. Gosh, what all do? I'm one of those people that has to be reminded that no is a complete sentence. I haven't figured that out yet. So I'm involved in a little bit of everything. I actually know Renee because when I first moved here, we were both really active in the Metropolitan Board, which is the Urban League Young Professionals here in Chicago. Which is kind of my introduction to Chicago, actually. I am also an active member of Theta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha and the Hoffman Estates, Illinois chapter of the Links Incorporated, among my 3,000 professional organizations. So I think the most exciting thing is I am the president-elect of the American Planning Association, of which I will be the first Black woman president. So I'm super excited about that, which will begin next year. But I guess more importantly, my most important role right now is caregiver to Elbert, who is my father, who is in Seattle, Washington. So I'm sure as we get to talking, we'll get to hear my experience with that. And my hashtag is Raising Elbert.
Okay. Dr. Nicole, I told you it's going to be fun. So Dr. Nicole, please give us a brief introduction about your fabulousness.
Well, I'm just loving hashtag Raising Elbert. Let me just acknowledge that. So I'm Nicole Rochester. I am a pediatrician by training, practiced medicine for almost 20 years, and that's all I ever thought I was going to do until caregiving entered my life. And so my two older sisters and I were caregivers to our late father. He passed away in 2013. And that 3-year journey was completely transformational. And really, for me, there were several lessons, but I was really struck by the complexity of the healthcare system. Being a physician, one of my other two older sisters is a nurse. So we came into it thinking that that was going to be the easy part of the journey. And it was not at all. And over again, I just saw all of these unnecessary barriers preventing my dad from receiving the care that he needed. And also realizing pretty quickly as a physician the advantage that it afforded me, being able to ask questions that the average caregiver wouldn't even know to ask, being able to unfortunately catch near misses and some medical errors, and just having to literally like fight for my dad to advocate for him. And so once he passed away, and I just started reflecting on all of the ways that we were able to help him and how my medical knowledge and expertise and honestly, I hate to say this, but influence, when you say you're a doctor, all of a sudden people act differently. They treat you differently. And that actually angered me. And so I just couldn't unsee what we had seen as caregivers. And so like you said, Dr. Renee, I ended up leaving clinical medicine in 2017 and launching a company, Your GPS Doc, where I help patients and their family caregivers understand and navigate this ridiculously complicated healthcare system.
Yeah. So, I was just telling before we started, everyone, I've talked about it here before. And actually, Dr. Nicole's been on here before. And we talked about caregiving. My dad is whom I'm caregiving for with the help of my lovely mother, who is a saint, and my sister. And my father, he has gone to rehab, but insurance requires that he takes these breaks, which I, for the life of me, will never understand. And this is not necessarily somebody who is on just government insurance. He has private insurance as well. And it just baffles my mind that they allow that to happen. Just like, I'm like, you're underdoing everything that you just did. And it seems to me that you wouldn't want to pay more, because you have to pay for more care if you undo what you've already done. It just,
Hmm.
the whole, exactly, just makes no sense. And she is absolutely right. I have had to say I am Dr. Renee on more than a few occasions because that's the only way people will pay attention. Unfortunately, my father got sick during COVID, which made caregiving really interesting because we couldn't go to the hospital and we couldn't go to the rehabs. And I have said on here a million times, you have to have an advocate and they have to be there. And if you can't even get people on the phone and you can't even drive to the location, it's like, what are you supposed to do? And calling we called regularly more than once a day. And I wasn't trying to drive him crazy, but we couldn't get answers. And it wasn't until one of the lovely ladies in our group, Mocha, that was so kind. She was able to help me every day with an update on my dad because I couldn't. And mind you, we've not met in person yet, which is crazy. She has been on Black Doctor with me, but we haven't met in person yet. But she actually left the state when I came. Right when I was coming, she moved. So hopefully we will meet one day in the future. But she was nice enough to get on three-way with me and my mom and to run through everything because it was just a nightmare. And my mom is medical too. My mom is a respiratory therapist. And so she understands everything too. And so she's lost, I'm lost. And we're like, this doesn't make sense. So Angela has a very interesting predicament because as she mentioned, she's in Chicago and he's in Seattle. So I can't even imagine your conversations with the people at the hospital
Well,
even.
you're assuming I get to have them, so let's start with that. Um, so my father's been diabetic since he was diabetic before my mom died, so probably since about 85, 80, 45. But I know absolutely nothing about diabetes, which I shouldn't admit in public, but I don't. And so probably a little over a year ago now, my father's diabetes just hasn't been under good control. So up until recently, he was in the hospital at least 2 weeks a month. And like you, Renee, it happened during COVID. So like it wasn't even worth my going home.
And that was,
Eh,
I stayed. She knows because she actually was so kind. She brought me Easter dinner. Um, I stayed home up until July, and my dad, the first stroke was March 24th,
Yeah.
and then
And
he went back to the hospital. So I stayed until he got out of the second rehab.
yeah, I think that's the hardest part. Even if I can't do anything, just being in the space would be. So there's the mental thing. So the first time he was in the hospital, like 6 weeks. And so I did go home when he got out. And he didn't want me to, but then he realized, oh, I've been in the hospital 6 weeks. I don't have the energy or the strength to do things like empty out my refrigerator because everything is rotten.
Oh,
So there's that kind of thing. So coming in for that. And then I think for, my father's probably the strongest man I know. And so having to literally have his only daughter literally wipe his butt. I mean, not quite that bad, but literally take care of him is probably really hard for him as well. And then since then, he's literally been in and out of the hospital about 2 weeks a month. And so I don't go home every time. I've been really, really, really fortunate. My best friend since preschool is temporarily in Seattle. So she and her husband have been doing a lot of the pitch hitting for me when he's been in like you, my father has his, VA benefits, so he does that, but he also has his private insurance. And I never know how he picks what hospital he's going to. Um, so there's that. So he's been in several, so I don't know that that helps either. And so keeping up with that, and then his primary care doctor is awesome, but
That's great.
his experience in the hospital, it's hit or miss. I don't want it's Veterans Day, whatever. When he goes to the VA, it's hit or miss on if I get good response. I think, I had to ask a lot of my friends. I probably asked you, is it reasonable for me to expect that a nurse or a doctor call me every day? Because I'm trying to be reasonable, but I need them to understand I'm 2,000 miles away. And even if I were there, I can't see him. Somebody
Right.
needs to tell me something. And he's not in a point where he either doesn't want to or can't explain everything I need to
Exactly.
know.
that's
I
it.
think it might be a little can't, but, or won't, but,
Probably
um,
both.
Right.
yeah, because it's get out of my business. But sir, I gotta know, do I need to come home? So, we had one really good experience. I need to like still send this doctor a thank you note. She would call me every day, even if it was like some crazy time. She would take pictures of things she was giving him because my father has a brand new iPhone, but he doesn't know how to do that. Like, hey, I'm going to text you this picture so you can see what I'm telling him. She would have him
Oh,
call me and put me on speaker every single time, left a note in his file. So like when he went to pharmacy, they knew to call, have him call and put me on speaker. She wrote a very detailed letter because sometimes discharge paperwork, I
It's
can't figure
very
that crap out.
oh,
vague.
yes.
So she
They're
wrote a
trash.
specific letter with bullet points. She's like, I'm gonna make this easy. And then she texted a copy of it to me, which
Oh
was
my
awesome.
gosh.
So she went above and beyond. And at in one of our conversations, she finally mentioned that she's Chinese and her mother is in China, so she understands what it's like. And
Mhm.
like she was so awesome. Like I not that I want my father to go in the hospital again, but to the extent he has to go, I really hope he gets on her rotation so
Right.
I get her again because she was really good. And so I think my biggest frustration really has been the communication aspect of it. I try to give grace because I can't imagine being a healthcare worker at this time. But at the same time, I live 2,000 miles away and I'm often trying to figure out, do I go home or do I not? Because this hasn't been cheap. I have to
Right.
go. I've gone home more in the last year and a half than I have in the last 15 years I've lived in Chicago. And again, I'm just really fortunate. I have friends who've gifted me miles. So at least four of my tickets have been mileage tickets from someone else. Um, so I mean, I can't imagine what this would have been like without that. And then I just have my dad's in a fraternity. He's got enough. So I have people I can call to do stuff. But most recently, and this was the one that probably scared me the most, my dad passed out and I don't know any of this. He has to call me every day with his blood sugar. So, and I talked to him at lunch. So he was good till the next day. But one of his frat brothers called me and it was Renee knows this. I go to bed kind of early. So it was like 8:30 and I was teetering on not answering the phone because I was kind of almost asleep. But I answer most Seattle calls, but the specific five, my dad's Fab Five, I'm answering whatever whenever. And so his frat brother was like, hey, your dad's not answering and I'm worried. I was like, well, it's like 6:30. I mean, he might be out. He's like, no, when your dad doesn't answer my calls, he rejects it with a little note like "can't talk." And so I don't know he can do that because he just
Right.
doesn't answer. He's never sent me that, so I'm like, he knows how to do that. And so thank God Vinny raised the alarm because I was like, should I send somebody over? He was like, yes. And so my best friend's husband went over and I left my key with them, thank God. And my dad was laying on the kitchen floor.
Oh my
And
God.
so that was probably about 6:30, and I had probably talked to him around 1 o'clock. So we're not sure how long he was down there, but my friend's husband was like, it looked like maybe he was trying to warm up dinner, so maybe he hadn't been there that long, and he had his glucose tablets in his hand. So I think maybe he was aware his blood sugar was low.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, his check-in time for me would have been by 9 a.m. the next day. So by the time that
Oh,
medics got there, hypothermia had started setting in. And it wasn't even that cold, but his nerve damage from diabetes is so bad that he gets cold easily. So, like, that was when it really sank in, like, he could have died. And
mhm.
so, that's when I was like, okay, one, I need to start going home more often, but like, he doesn't want to go to assisted living. And I get it. I totally get it. It would be much easier for me, but, he's almost 76. So that last bit of independence is just so
Yeah.
important. And so, it's definitely been a challenge, but I mean, kudos to my village. They have been extremely helpful. Um, yeah, but you're right about the healthcare system. Like I was like, well, even if he has to go to assisted living, I don't know what the hell to do. I mean, like, I
Right.
don't know the steps, I don't know the process, I don't know what the Medicaid, I don't know any of this stuff. And it does get overwhelming. And I have 2 degrees
Mm-hmm.
and I can read and write pretty well. And I'm having a hard time
Exactly.
figuring this out. So, Dr. Nicole, awesome to you for creating a third party way to help some of us. Cause I mean, it is so frustrating. My dad participates in every clinical trial he can. And so one of the women was so helpful. She's a former nurse, and she's like, "Here's my number. If you need anything, I know everybody at the VA. I can get you answers." And that's how I've gotten some response some of the times. I'm like, I'm pulling every string I know.
Exactly. You have
Absolutely.
to.
But it's
Absolutely.
sad. Like, it's so sad, to your point, Renee, about having an advocate. I can't even be an advocate because I don't even know enough to be an advocate. So that's
Yeah.
been the real learning curve for me. Like,
And
I
even,
need to know a little more.
advocate doesn't even have to have medical knowledge. Advocate is just somebody who can sit there and say, no, this is like, I will tell you, perfect example. I had a very ill family member, and his best friend said to me, Renee, is this right? Because I don't think this is right. And it was just turning the patient in the bed. That's it.
Wow.
And I said, no, you're right. They're supposed to turn them every so often, or they're supposed to, And he, like I said, completely non-medical person. He came and asked me, and he said, I told them that they needed to do that. And when I go, I try. And I was like, exactly. So
But
it's just
that's part of the issue, like you said, is that most family caregivers don't know what is right. Like they don't know what's supposed to happen. You know what I mean? They don't, it's
yeah,
if you don't, outside of medicine, it may be difficult for you to even know if your family member is receiving what we call standard of care. So
right.
Yeah.
if you don't know what's supposed to happen, then you're not sure whether to question it. And so I would say, like you said, Dr. Renee, you definitely have an advantage if you are in
Right.
healthcare, but you don't have to be in healthcare. And all of us have a gut and an instinct. And
And
that's what
that's
I
what
tell
this
my
guy,
clients.
it was his gut instinct that
Exactly.
something's not right. And everyone, I'm sure everyone watches TV, movies, and heard of bed sores, and they
Yeah.
were like, he was like, I think this is how they come if you don't move. So
That's right.
I think he has to move. And if he can't walk, then we got to do something. And I was like, and I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. You guys, if you have questions or comments, please make sure you put them in. I will try to get to them as best I can. But I was going to say also, um, with my dad, we found in one of the rehabs, my dad, I've mentioned this before, my dad is from Antigua. He does have an accent. I think that it is just a British accent to me, and I can understand the man fine. Obviously, I grew up with him. Now, it wasn't until my friends would talk to my dad, like if he answered the phone when they'd call, that I found out my dad like really had a strong accent. Because honestly, I didn't think he had one at all. Um, so so remember that, right? So my dad has a stroke, right? And he's in the hospital, and then he's in the rehab. And so when he first had the stroke, my dad fell out. Thankfully, my mother went to the kitchen, and so I don't think he was down for very long. She went in, found him, called 911. So thankfully, but he could not talk even when he left this house, and he had to leave by himself. They would not let her go in the ambulance because this happened March 24th, 2020. So my mom, we got on the phone, my best friend, who is somebody who lives very close enough to my parents than I do in Chicago. I called her and was like, ma'am, my dad looks like he's had a stroke. And so we were on three-way with my mom, and she's like, all due respect, Mrs. Matthews, you need to go to the hospital. Tell them that you can't be there, but you need to go. Hospital is literally 2 lights from our house. And my mom, she almost made it. She made it past one guard and just didn't make it past the second one.
Oh man.
But the nurse saw her and was like, let me take down your number. I promise I will call you. What I do know is they are giving him a stroke protocol right now. So that does look like what it is, blah, blah, blah. So that was great. But my dad, one of the rehabs, one of the people, I think it was a nurse. He was a nurse. He was Jamaican. How do I know this? Because we would call my dad every day, and the gentleman was in the room and we heard him talking. I said, excuse me. What island are you from? And he's like, Jamaica. And I was like, I just literally breathed a sigh of relief. And so did my sister. Mind you, we're on three-way because we were in 3 different states. And we were like, thank you, Jesus. So then I go, we're Antiguan. He goes, I asked Mr. Matthews, I said, what's Wagwan? And he didn't respond. And I was like, I said, he's being, and then he goes, then I asked him, is he from New York? And my dad said, no, my dad said yes or something. And I said, no, he's Antiguan. And he's like, oh, okay. And we were like, when will you be at work again? And I mean, we were on FaceTime actually. So I saw him and I'm just like, hello.
You saw an ally, somebody that could help.
Because the thing is, we went to one hospital, the same hospital he always goes to. One of the ladies thought that he wasn't speaking anything that was knowledgeable or legible. And we were like, and then I talked to him on the phone. I'm like, but he is making sense. So I was like, Lord, we got language barriers that are going to really give us issues and then the first hospital they lost is closed. How did you lose his clothes? Wow. So when my mom was like, can I take him to the rehab? Because that's the first time she's seen her husband in, 10 days.
Yeah.
So she drove him to the rehab and he was in the hospital gown. They didn't tell her before she came that he didn't have any clothes.
Because she could have brought some to him.
Exactly.
And there's something that Angela said that I just wanted to circle back to really quickly. When she said that amazing doctor that was calling you every day and that wrote that very comprehensive discharge summary and texted you a copy, you said that she went above and beyond. And I just want to challenge that a little bit because, my personal thoughts as a physician and as a health advocate and a former caregiver are that that's what we should be doing, and I know that, trust me, especially now with COVID, like you said, I mean, there's a lot on the plate of doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals, but somebody needs to take that on. And I just feel very strongly that caregivers, we need to stop that. We should not be considered as visitors. And this really is pertinent with this discussion about COVID and caregivers being literally shut out of hospitals, rehab facilities, but we're not visitors. Like, we are an integral part of that healthcare team. And so that doctor communicating to you once a day, in my opinion, was like, that's the bare minimum. That should be the bare minimum. So I'm not saying we give her kudos, because clearly she did what most of her colleagues were not doing. But I think we should normalize that instead of thinking that, what she did is some standard that no other doctor can meet. Everybody should do that.
Yeah, I mean, this last year and a half, I haven't experienced that at all. Like, literally, I haven't. Like, I would leave messages. I'm like, okay, nursing staff. I don't even need a doctor. I can take the nurse. Right. I just want to know his stats, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm calling. I have an advantage of time. So I wake up. Okay, it's the end of the overnight staff shift. I should be able to catch them. Like, I should be able to catch you. It's like 4:30 your time. Nope. No calls back. So that's been the more frustrating part, because I do have enough friends who are first responders and healthcare workers. So I'm like, I'm trying to give you grace, but that's my daddy. That's my only parent. Somebody needs to answer this freaking phone and give you some updates. And so that's why I told him, Dad, when they come to you, just put it on speaker. Like, you put it on speaker.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to suggest. Is a lot of times I'll tell my clients what you said. When they come in the room, you call me, if they're able to physically, and then put it on speaker, and then you are present for those conversations and those discussions. Because a lot of times, sometimes the messages don't make it to them, or maybe the secretary at the desk will say, Dr. So-and-so, Miss Brooks called about her dad. They'll tuck that note in their white coat pocket And next thing they're running around saving lives and doing all kinds of things, not to make excuses, but and
Yeah.
then then it's the end of the day. They've now handed off
The
to
next
another
person.
provider.
Yeah.
I feel like
And it's
one of them must have left a note that I'm kind of crazy because there's one time I did get a lot of responses because I was like, okay, I'm going to call every 45 minutes and I set a timer. Somebody's going to talk to me eventually.
yeah,
Good.
I mean,
Good
but
for
you have
you.
to do that. And like she said, that's her only living parent. My dad obviously is not my only living parent, but still, like, he was my dad. And I was like, no, we need to know what's going on. And, and then the other thing is, because my mom, she cannot, I don't need two sick parents. And because of her worrying, I had, as a matter of fact, I don't know if I told you, I called my mother's doctor that Easter that you brought me. Did I called my mother's doctor and made her call my mom, because my
Wow.
mother had not one but two Easter dinners offered to her, and she couldn't eat either one. My mother doesn't take pain meds, but you're in that much pain, something's wrong. I need to check. But I'm in Chicago, so there's only so much I can do. I
Hmm.
looked up the lady's number online, called the answering service. She called me. I told her who I was. I had met her once. I told her who I was. She said, I will do that. And she called my mom.
Wonderful.
And I was like, because I told my sister, like, we got to do something, because my sister was in Jersey. I was like, we have to do something. So my thing is, you have to be careful with these doctors that tell the wrong person too much information, because then I'm like, no, no, no. Because like we had one lady who gave up on my dad.
Mm.
He's not gonna get any better. And da-da-da. So my mother calls me a wreck. And I'm like, and I'm trying to hold it together, like, what is she talking about? So we talked to him that same day, and he was sounding like, okay. We're like, what is she talking about? She was saying this because he was sleeping a lot. Like you said, Dr. Nicole, we aren't visitors. We are part of the team. If
That's
we were
right.
able to be there, he wouldn't be so depressed. He was depressed
Exactly.
because he has had a stroke. He has absolutely no idea where he is.
Hmm.
He's not seen one human being that he recognizes. There
Mhm.
is nobody there that seems to understand what he's saying. Like, he's
Yeah.
lost and confused.
Oh
I
yeah.
was sleeping a lot too.
I don't
Absolutely.
know. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to really grasp what has happened during COVID with as a result of eliminating caregivers from healthcare facilities. There have been so many horrific tales of people just languishing in nursing homes, not because they were sick from COVID, not because they had some heart attack, but because they stopped eating. Because, like you said, they have dementia. They didn't recognize the staff. They only eat for their wife, or they only eat for their daughter or their son, and that person was just completely taken out of the picture. I mean, it's just
And
devastating.
I kept reminding the nurses that, like, I'm like you, Angela, I'm calling every day. Or when I couldn't get, I'm calling every hour. I'm like, we gonna catch somebody. I said, you have to remind him every time that you talk to him. You have to remind him why we are not there. Because at
Yes.
this point in his head, he thinks that we have left him on the side of the road for dead.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
that's
though we call and talk to him every day, he doesn't even realize that we've called. And so if
Hmm.
you, every time you see him, you say and oh, we printed pictures and had pictures in every hospital stay. He had pictures in his room. And we explained, but like I said, unfortunately, I had to put on the doctor hat. I had to get in touch with someone. We ended up having one of the heads of the doctor of the hospital, heads of the hospital. This is a huge hospital conglomerate in Detroit. Call me, and we talked. And that person had to then put people on the case, and so we were treated totally different after
Of course you were.
that.
you
I
know,
shouldn't
and
have to do that though.
it's so sad that you have to recognize the level of privilege that you have to be able to do that because there's so many
Yes.
people who don't, and then that just makes me more irritated.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I just think about like my dad had a heart attack at one of these trips. So, that I'm getting on a plane and I was like, I may not be able to see him, but I need to go.
Right.
And, my dad was scared. He's like, don't come. You're not going to be able to see me. And that particular time, he didn't go to his normal hospital. So he went to a hospital that my godmother was having surgery. So her caregiver was able to be with her for surgery. So she was able to jump down to his room before they caught her. They caught her the
Wow.
day two, but at least he got to see somebody. And my dad is not necessarily the warm, fuzzy type. by any stretch. But he was so happy to see somebody he knew and recognized because that was the one time I know he was a little scared. But yeah, there's something to be said about familiar faces
Mm-hmm.
that, you can't undercut that. I mean, it's priceless. And so
Right.
that's been by far I can't even imagine what it's like to sit in a hospital the first time my dad for 6 weeks and only have your phone.
Right.
Yeah.
He finally did figure out how to use FaceTime, so that helped him a little bit. I don't have an iPhone, but everybody else does, so he was able to see a few people. Although you didn't see him because he'd just be talking, you'd be looking at the ceiling. But
So Dr. Nicole has a group that we have some discussions that are about this, obviously. And someone recently asked about transportation, and I have been around circles with the vets. They're not giving my dad anything, and they said they do things based on
Need
how much
financial.
money, and
That's right.
I was like, this is ridiculous.
yeah,
But when I tell you, I've told everybody the business to go into is senior transportation. Senior transportation is so expensive.
Yep.
And if you're lucky to live in a city that gives discounts to seniors, that you're able to put someone on, we can't just put my dad on some, transportation and he get to where he's going. Someone has to go with him. So it's a whole thing. But when you have to be in a vehicle with a wheelchair, that's just not your everyday vehicle that anyone owns. I mean, the best of SUVs
Yep.
can't handle a wheelchair,
You're absolutely
let
yeah,
alone
right.
can I get it in there?
yeah. See, I'm lucky in that way. My dad's not wheelchair bound; he is using a walker and a cane. But they do have, I guess it's the equivalent of the Pace bus here or whatever the access thing is. So he's got that. And then I don't know if I think it's from the county transportation metro. He's able to buy cab tickets at a discount. So like if he gets 40, he gets $80 worth of cab things. Because one of the times his blood sugar dropped, he totaled his car. So he is no longer able to drive.
Mhm.
So those cab tickets get him to his doctor's appointments. Now, my father's very social, so he has his little breakfast crew. So somebody will always come pick him up for that. Like even during COVID, when the inside, and it's Burger King, the inside of Burger King was closed, they would sit in the parking lot and get their tea and coffee. They're not even eating, and they would just sit in their cars and roll
Aw.
down their windows. So like that's probably the thing that frustrates him the most. So he has a ride for that. So he's good now. But the cab has been a godsend for making sure he gets to and from the doctor. Because when you're doing that I guess it's whatever it's called, the access van thing, the timetable. It's like when they used to be airport shuttles, you'd have to go
Oh
3 hours
boy.
in advance because there'd be all these
Oh
other stops.
yeah.
Yes. My dad was a dialysis patient. So can you
Oh
imagine
yeah.
he had to get the dialysis 3 days a week? He was there for about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And my sisters and I all worked full time. And so we
Yeah.
have to set up, I'm in the DC area. So it's called Metro Access here. But you have to do it far in advance. And sometimes they would show up late, or if he was
Yeah.
moving slowly, they would leave him. My dad has been left at home. Now dialysis is a life-saving procedure. So now we're
Exactly.
scrambling, trying to figure out
Yeah.
how we're going to get our dad to dialysis, or he's been left at the dialysis center, because they're on a tight schedule. And so
They are.
if he's not coming out that door fast enough, they would just pull off and leave him. I mean, you guys are just bringing back all the
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah, I
But
cannot even imagine.
every city should have a department, what is it called? Area of aging, correct?
Most of them do,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, most cities do.
Yeah.
And if
And
you can call that, there are a lot of resources. They might not, they literally, instead of you having to Google senior transport, they will have the resources. They can tell you and they'll tell you this one is private, it's expensive, or this one is that. They have a lot of information. They have information about people to come in your house to help you.
yep.
Um, there's just so
Yeah.
many things that you can call and get help on. Medications. We talked about this. As a matter of fact, last week we talked about diabetes. November is also National Diabetes Month.
I should have listened in because I know nothing.
Well, I'll send you the link. But so diabetes and every drug, because I had to do it with my dad with medications. You should call the manufacturer. If the drug just costs too darn much, call the manufacturer.
Oh yeah, they'll give you a discount.
And they will probably give you a discount. Nowadays, you don't have to pick up the phone. You can Google and you can go to the manufacturer's website. And I promise you on that site, it says something about having trouble paying for your meds or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even with insurance, drugs can still be very expensive. Perfect example, there was a drug my dad was taking that was $3,000 or something for the month supply. And we were like, what? And so my mom's like, oh my God. And we were like trying to figure out, well, so she's like, well, can we get, and they just got, I think like 2 weeks supply or something. So they said, that's fine. So they called that in and we said, we'll talk to, and that we had already been, we had a social worker that came and she said, you need to talk to the manufacturer. So she goes, did you get enough to get you by? Yes. So we got that. My mother goes to the drugstore. To this day, we don't know who it was. I'm pretty sure it was a basketball player. Some tall black man with his mask on paid for the medicine for my mom.
Oh
Oh,
my
that's
gosh.
awesome.
And so when she went up there to give her card, the lady goes, the gentleman paid for it. My mother was like, what gentleman? And she's like, and
Oh,
then I would say, I don't know athletes either. So I'm not saying that I would know who he was, but he pulled his mask down and said, hi, blah, blah, blah. But, and, no problem because she
wow.
thanked him. So my mom, I think I was supposed to know who he was. I said, oh, well. But
But that's a good, I mean, the thing about the manufacturer, Dr. Renee, is a great resource. And also, what you mentioned, a lot of times medications are cheaper if you don't go through your insurance. And a lot of people don't know that.
yes,
Sometimes,
that's
if you ask for the self-pay amount, just paying out of your pocket, or even using things like GoodRx is another great,
oh,
it's a
yes. And
website,
there's another
you
one
know,
I can't think of the name of, but yeah.
I'm blanking on. You're right. There's several, but definitely, looking into some of these discounted medication sites or going directly to the manufacturer. And these are things that, I mean, I don't know about you all. I'm impressed that you all know these things, because I feel like when my sisters and I were in the throes of it, we were just focused on trying to literally keep my dad alive, keep him
Right.
healthy. And so it was like after my caregiving journey was over, then all of a sudden I became aware of all of these resources. And we were like, okay,
And
that would have
also,
been
you
nice.
guys, generic, do not be afraid of generic medications.
Hmm.
Medications have generic just means that some big pharma didn't purchase and that's why the name hasn't changed. I mean, I'm telling you, it's the same exact drugs.
Yep,
So please don't be afraid of generics, but generics can be a whole lot cheaper. But it's so
absolutely.
important that it's important that our elderly population get their medication, because I unfortunately have experienced working with different companies, I've experienced people who said, oh, I haven't taken my blood pressure medicine for a week because I ran out and I couldn't
Hmm.
afford it. Or I haven't taken my diabetes medicine for a week because insulin is extremely expensive too. You
Yep.
guys, there are ways to get your medication. So please, if you have a loved one and you're the one taking over things, make sure that they have all their medicine. Somebody is asking, do we know of programs that will pay a family member to take care of their parent? So I've been told that certain vets, I don't know what the criteria is, they will pay, they will pay family members to take care of them. Do you know of any other?
Yes, you're right, through the VA, and also, through, if you go again to that area agency on aging, pretty much every state, most counties have their own area agency on aging. That's a
It is.
twister. But if you call them, they can help with that. But a lot of counties will have programs where they will pay a family caregiver to care for a loved one. Like many things, sometimes, I mean, there are very specific requirements, and that may vary county to county, state to state. Sometimes they may be income based. But I definitely encourage you all to look into that. It definitely happens. There are some cases where, family members are paid. And I think all family caregivers should be paid.
Should be
That's
paid.
probably a conversation for next time.
Right.
But the work that family caregivers do, this is unpaid, essentially medical care. I mean, family caregivers are administering medications, doing physical therapy, as you mentioned with your dad, helping with the
Yeah.
exercise, all of the things that, if we weren't doing those things, these costs would be absorbed by the healthcare system. So to just kind of assume that, caregivers, oh, that's what you do. And it's true. We do. Like, we're going to step up for our loved ones every time, but at the expense sometimes of our own employment and, other things in our own lives. And so it can be difficult. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but there are some programs in place. And if you go through your local area agency on aging, they can likely give you the information for the application for those types of programs.
Another resource I found through Catholic Charities in Seattle, and I'm assuming they have a African American Elders Program, but
Oh,
Catholic Charities in general, but in Seattle it's
Nice.
specifically for African Americans. But yeah, the Association of Catholic Charities, which is probably in every city, they also have a
Mhm.
lot of resources. So definitely reach out to them, and they don't like ask you, are you Catholic or anything like
Well,
that. So
the Jewish family service, they have resources, and you don't have to be Jewish, because I
Yeah.
we were looking for rides for my dad to doctor's appointments, and they have a sliding scale, so it wasn't going to be ridiculous. The only problem was they didn't go the limits of the boundaries. It was too far, but they do have that, so you can also look into that. So I'm telling you, it's a
You
lot
have
of
to be
work.
very
Like,
resourceful as a
besides the
family
fact that
caregiver.
you're trying to keep somebody alive, it's a lot of work to figure out how to get them to their doctor's appointments, how to get their medications to them, and all of that. But once you get it done, it is a wonderfully well-oiled machine. But it can be a lot of work to get it all together. But that area agency on aging is a huge help. If you can
Mhm.
contact them, I'm telling you, they have an answer for everything you can think of. They'll tell you the medical supplies. Also, when you do have a loved one and this happens, most of the time they should give you a social worker, and the social worker should be able to help you a lot navigate things, because obviously they know that you have no idea, and they want to make sure that the patient is okay going home. So you should be able to have a social worker. That the social worker, because of COVID, we never got to the hospital. They came to the house, and we
Can
talked to
I
her
just say a
and
quick thing
explained.
about social workers?
Yep.
And I love social workers, so this is not a dig against social workers, but I just want to make sure that family caregivers are aware that the social worker that is in the hospital works for the hospital.
Right.
So you just need to be aware of that. And I
I
can tell
found that
you
out the
that,
hard way.
yeah, and they're great people, and trust me, like they want to do the right thing, but at the end of the day, their job literally is to get your loved one out of the hospital as quickly as possible, because it's all about the dollar when it comes to hospitals and healthcare. So just keep that in mind. And I say that because that you may have to push back sometimes. With my dad, my late grandmother, and many other family members, the social worker was sometimes the person that would come in the room at the 11th hour with a list of 3 nursing homes and say, "Oh, your grandma's going to be discharged tomorrow. Here's a list of 3 places. I'll be back in the morning. Tell me where they're going." Oh, no, no, no. They didn't know who they were dealing with.
I got a
So,
list of 8.
oh, 8, that's good.
No, that's what happened to us. But remember, we never were in there. So she just called, and I want to say she emailed them to my mom. My mother goes, I haven't had a discussion with this one. I don't know nothing about these places. Who do I? So
Yes.
this is another time where you need to pull your resources and figure out who knows something about what, because if no, you can't just send your loved one any place. You need to investigate these places.
Please.
If you can't investigate them, you need to call somebody who has some information. So that's when you need to rely on the church family and the sorority and the links and whatever. Ask people who have been in the same situation, or you think might, or you remember, oh, so and so, that's their industry. They work in that industry,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been
because you
lucky.
got to get that.
I've had a few friends who are healthcare administrators, so I've been able to get some questions on that. But like, it's been a reminder to me to make sure I have my long-term care insurance in place, because
Mm-hmm.
seeing the staggering cost of the places that have the same standard of quality of life that my father would be used to, I'm like, ooh,
Very expensive.
I don't know that you got that, bro. I don't know what to offer. I don't know what we're
Right.
gonna do. Like, yeah, I'm glad you don't want to go, because man, I can't solve for that number.
Right. Long-term care insurance is very important. I've learned that too.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
if you wait too long, I mean, you're smart to be thinking about it now, because you can't wait until your loved one is already sick or disabled or elderly. By
yeah.
then, they either won't qualify or the cost will be so exorbitant that you wouldn't be able to afford it. And so it's this planning. These are the things that we don't often talk about.
Particularly
Nobody
us
wants to
of
think about
color.
when they're older. Nobody wants to think about when they're disabled or sick, but these are the things that we need to talk about, and these are the things that we need to plan for.
Yeah, I mean, the cost is just, I just had no idea. And I, you talked about your father had dialysis. I'm a kidney donor. So I went up on a lot of my insurances before I did it in the event something changed. But I sure wish I had thought about long-term care, because I was like, man, if they try to give me a crazy quote because of that, I'm be mad.
Oh Lord. Oh Lord.
And for me, it's just been really because I think about myself not having children, like who's going to do this when I'm that age? And so it's just
Mhm.
been like I'm like I might need to go to adopt a kid real quick because like this amount of like who's going to do this? So
Right.
it's been really eye opening for me. And so it's nice I have all these checklists of stuff I need to make sure I'm taking care of on the front end for myself.
Yeah.
But it's the cost. Like it's just there's got to be a better way. I was like, maybe we need to move to Europe because it seems
Right.
like they do a better job, or Canada or somewhere.
Yeah, the other thing is my mom and dad, they're planners. They've got everything taken care of. So my sister and I are powers of attorney. So that was another thing when I did call, they want to ask immediately before they say anything. I was like,
That's
yes.
right.
And actually one time he had to go to the ER, and of course they wouldn't let us go. So they said we would hear from them by a certain time, and we didn't hear from them. So I said, well, I'm going to call. So I called, and this nurse, he picked the wrong one that day anyway, but he was like, well, he's had some tests. Okay,
Some
well, what test?
tests.
Right. I go, what test? Oh, well, I can't give you that information without his excuse me. And I said, but sir, I just told you that the lady put me through because I am the, oh, well, I'm, because of HIPAA. I go, excuse me? I was like, this man is not Kevin Hart, and I'm calling to get his private information. Like, so the funniest thing was, we were on speaker, me and my mom. My mother's like blown away. This man is giving us nothing. But it's late night, so it's like you're not sending him home. But why are you keeping him? We have no idea what's going on. So I had sent a message. We have these lovely apps with the hospitals now. I had sent a message to the doctor, and he had responded, and he had told me, "Here's my cell. You just let me know if you." Girl, I had
Wow.
sent him a text message, and by the grace of God, he called back while we were on the phone with this nurse, and God bless that nurse. But my mother was on the phone with him still. I go, Mom, it's the doctor. My mother, the doctor is on the phone. Goodbye. Because we were just like, are you serious? And then I told the doctor what happened. The doctor was like, I can't believe that they wouldn't give you the information. I couldn't either.
Oh, well,
Did you
HIPAA
have
is
copies?
often used and they mean well when healthcare workers are citing HIPAA, but it was never meant to prevent a family caregiver from getting information about their loved one. You know what I mean? And so many
Yeah.
people use that as a barrier to information. And so, not only do you have to arrange to have a power of attorney, but you want to encourage your loved ones to have that documentation on them. Because like you said, Angela,
Oh,
your
yeah.
dad goes from hospital to hospital. So maybe this hospital has the form on file, but the other one may not. And so that's something that he should keep on him.
And
You know,
I should have, because at the start of this, I didn't have it. It existed, but I didn't have a copy. So I now have a copy of everything, but
excellent.
I didn't have it. And so, I was like, oh God, I don't have a copy. And another thing I've learned is to one, get a copy of all his discharge papers because it lists his medicines. Because the few times somebody has been present when they've had to call 911 for him, they'll call me and they're like, what medicine? They say, oh, I don't know, insulin. I was like, he's diabetic, he has high blood pressure, and he has kidney disease. I can tell you that, but what he takes, I don't know. So it's been helpful. My dad's doing really well in sending me that paperwork because in my head, I'm going to remember because I'm sure I've been told, but I'm not. So
Right.
having that and having a folder, I have a huge folder now that I can go to. I have one notebook where I keep notes. My cousin, who's a doctor, sometimes I just like, you call because to your point, Renee, he gets better answers than me.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's third party, and then I get offended because I'm like, why couldn't you just tell me that? So,
Right.
but
Or look,
definitely,
or the three-way, because that's what we were like, okay, I'm gonna call. And you know what? This crazy thing happened. My dad, we were like, they said, we think he's had another stroke. This was at rehab that day. And so my mom came home and told me, and so she said, well, maybe we should call the doctor. The doctor said, it's up to you, figure out what do you think. So we called. My aunt worked at the hospital, and she was like, just call the ER and speak to the neurologist on call. So my mother calls, and this is like Saturday morning. Do you know Saturday passed and nobody called her back? So I said, Mom, wait a minute. So Sunday morning, I call. Do you know before I can hang up the phone, they were calling me back?
Of course.
It's like, you all are so crazy. And of course, they were like, he needs to come in, and he had had another stroke. And we're like, see, it's just unnecessary. And that's what it makes me very nervous for family members that don't have me in the house or don't have me
Absolutely.
on speed dial. I'm like, Lord Jesus, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And Angela, you mentioned not having your dad's medications, and that's, I think, most, especially you all are separated by thousands of miles. You mentioned that your dad, and this is true of many men, they don't really like they want to maintain that sense of independence, but it is extremely important that anybody, and when we say family caregiver, I don't think we've addressed this tonight, but you may think if you don't physically live with the person, you're not a caregiver. A family caregiver, you may be just not just, you may be the person that pays their bills every month because maybe they don't have the capacity to do that. Maybe you never deal with their medical care. That you're still a family caregiver. Or maybe you're the person that coordinates, who's going to come to the house, who's going to do their laundry. So I just want to make that clear, because so many people, we don't even identify as family caregivers. But the other thing I wanted to address is that it's really important that if you are responsible in any way for caring for a loved one, that you do have, details about their medical history, whether you're in healthcare or not, understanding like the names of the diseases that they have, their chronic conditions, their medications that they take, who are their healthcare providers, who's their primary care doctor, what specialist do they go to, what is their name, what is their phone number. And so, Dr. Renee, if you don't mind, I'd love to share a resource that the viewers can access. I have a free guide. I call it the Navigator Summary, and I really developed it out of a need that my own family had, and we use it for my clients and many of my friends and family members. But essentially, it allows you to very easily gather all that information on one sheet of paper, front and back, the doctor's names, even the power of attorney, who's responsible, who should they call. And then, you can put it on your refrigerator or their refrigerator. You can put it in their wallet, put it in your purse, put it in that folder. And you just have multiple copies of this document so that when they're in the emergency department or being hospitalized and they're asking all these questions, instead of you going, well, I think, you literally just whip it out, bam. Mm-hmm. So you can go to bit.ly/GPS one sheet. So GPS, like a GPS system. Yep. So it's bit.ly/GPS one sheet.
And that's all lowercase?
All lowercase.
Perfect.
And you
okay.
can grab that.
That's in the chat, and I'll put it in the post once we get done. But you guys can find Dr. Nicole at Your GPS Doc, Facebook, Instagram too, right?
Correct. Facebook, yep. Instagram,
and then
Twitter, although I'm not on Twitter a lot, but you can find me there too.
And then tell us also about your Clubhouse.
Oh, yeah. So for those of you who are on Clubhouse, and if you're not, you should be. But on Clubhouse, there's no longer an invitation requirement. You don't have to have an iPhone anymore. Welcome to everyone. But every Monday night, I have a club called the 90-Second Encounter Club, and we curate conversations between healthcare professionals, patients, and family caregivers. And so Monday, this upcoming Monday, the 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're actually going to be talking about caregiving. And so we're going to have family caregivers, but we're also going to have doctors and other healthcare professionals sharing tips about, how to communicate best as a family caregiver. What do you do to get behind that front desk and all those things? So that's 7 o'clock. But every Monday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern, I do a room on Clubhouse in the 90-Second Encounter Club. So I would love to see some of you join us there. Thank you, Dr. Renee.
Of course. But yes, so you guys, if you would figure out anything, this can be very difficult, but it's very, it's obviously something that's necessary. We have to do for our loved ones. And if we don't, who will? And don't take no for an answer. If you have to you just have to keep bothering them, and you just have to keep bothering them. And unfortunately, in the day of COVID today, I read that we're in the 4th COVID surge here in Michigan. So in the day of COVID, when you probably can't go to the hospital and you can only go to the window, you're going to have to get on the phone, and you're just going to have to keep calling and utilize these, like I said, the apps. The app that, My Chart app is fabulous. They upload the tests. Even when he was hospitalized, they uploaded the tests once he was inpatient. So I could access that, and I could read the things. So that gives you a lot of information. I think the discharge summaries might be uploaded on there too. So these apps that the doctors and the hospital systems have, try to utilize that. There's certain healthcare systems that actually do have websites, and you can log into the portal and see what you need to see. Make sure that your loved ones are logged into these things. Even if they don't ever access it, make sure you have access to it, because you are the one that's going to want this information one day. And those places have medication lists too.
That's right.
Medication lists, doctors lists, all of this information. Everyone, we say it all the time on Black Doctor, everybody needs a primary care doctor. Everybody needs a primary care doctor. Please make sure you have a primary care doctor in these times of emergencies, like Angela's father, like my dad. If you don't have a primary care doctor, you could really be in a whole lot of trouble, because who knows what's all going on with you if you don't have that one doctor.
That's
if you've
right.
been going to the clinic and seeing 10 different people, for the last 10 years, that's not helpful. And so you really want the best care, and the best care is you need a primary care doctor. And you also, if we always say here, Black Doctor, if you can get a Black doctor, now I know not all skin folk are kinfolk, but there have been studies done that we get better care from our own. And so if you can get a Black doctor, and, somebody even if it's not a Black doctor, make sure you trust your doctor. You listen to them. They explain things so you understand them. And they have no problem with you having an advocate, because I know there are some physicians, I hate to say, that have trouble with you bringing somebody with you.
Yes.
And I can't understand it, but I've heard it, and I know it's out there. If you have a doctor like that, then you probably should find someone else, because
That's right.
you need to hear it, and someone else needs to hear it, and the two of you can make sure that all of it was heard, whatever it is. So I hope that this has been helpful. Please, please, please reach out to Dr. Nicole. I'm telling you, your GPS doc, she is the one. And please pray for me and Angela.
I have been there, you all. It's gonna be okay.
Pray for us. We text, every blue moon we'll text, because we'll come up for air. But yeah, pray for us, because this is not easy. And Angela said one day, and I do believe she is right, this is a course that needs to be taught in high school. Nobody prepared us for this.
Absolutely. I agree, Angela, 1,000%.
Nobody prepared us for this. This is, it's different that, how they have you carry the egg when you're going to have a child and everything. I mean, to be honest, not everyone's going to have a child, but everyone will probably have an aging parent.
That's right.
Or a loved one, period, right? If it wasn't your parent, it was your guardian, it was your grandma. You know what I mean? Somebody's going to take care of somebody, right?
It's not for the faint.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So make sure that you please follow her, and I will make sure I post the GPS one sheet link in the post as well.
I've already requested mine. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
But thank you, ladies. This has been awesome, and I will see you guys next week. Next week we have a great show. Next week we're going to talk about a new innovation in blood pressure monitoring. That I know many of us know family members that have to take blood pressure meds, and this new innovation is a game changer, and will make it a lot easier on caregivers. So I hope you guys will tune in next week. We will be back here, same time, same place. Thank you again. And of course, you guys know you can follow me everywhere at Ask Dr. Renee. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Send me an email, DM me. You can reach me on my Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel, whatever.
You're everywhere.
Bye. I am.
Awesome.
Bye. Thank you, Renee.